Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, perhaps the most powerful and influential AM radio station in the nation, with a storied history. Yes, I grew up listening to 77 WABC in suburban Connecticut. For the next 2 hours, we'll be talking news, politics, history, food, style, and, well, a lot more. So don't touch that dial. Of course, you can always listen to us at WABCradio.com. We are streaming worldwide, 73 countries around the world as across the United States. I get mail from California. I get mail from Chicago. So the reach of WABCradio.com is really something. If you manage to miss us, of course, you can go to the 77 WABC Radio app, go to the App Store, download that to your phone right away. That way you will never miss any of the great programming that we have here at 77 WABC, both talk and entertainment. You want to download that app, folks. It's well worth it. Remember when State of the Union speeches by the president were uplifting, bipartisan, honestly cataloged what was going right in America and where we needed to do better? Well, Joe Biden's State of the Union speech was not like that. In fact, it was essentially an angry partisan harangue. A campaign stump speech. Never before in the history of the country has a president giving a State of the Union address mentioned his predecessor in that speech. In fact, Joe Biden made reference to Donald Trump, not by name, but by inference, 19 separate times. His tone was hot, angry. He had a strange look in his eye. I don't understand why he shouts and then he drops to a whisper. But by and large, I don't think this speech was successful. We also saw a new practice in the State of the Union, which maybe become de rigueur, but we've never had before. And that is people shouting at the president from the floor. Now, in British politics, this is, of course, a great tradition. They have the Prime Minister's question session, and they get pretty raucous with both party members shouting at each other. It's really very entertaining, but we've never seen that before in the United States. In this case, you actually had a Gold Star father who was at the speech, started shouting at the president. That gentleman has been arrested. His son died in Afghanistan during the horrific withdrawal there that left 13 Americans dead. The Capitol Hill police say they're going to charge that man. The speaker is seeking his release. Hard to believe that this is happening in America. And of course, when Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's going to join us next week on the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC Radio, asked the president to say the name of the young lady who was murdered, the president botched her name, calling her Lincoln Riley, when her name, of course, is Laken Riley. Haven't seen much like that in politics in my entire days. What is this really about? Well, what it's about is the fact that Joe Biden really can't run on his record, so he has to talk about Donald Trump. If you ask Americans what they think of the U.S. economy, they'll tell you things are not very good. Most Americans are stressed about the family budget. They worry about falling behind financially. They feel like what they've worked so hard to earn could be gone in an instant. But if you ask President Biden, and he talked about this in his speech, the economy couldn't be better. In fact, he put a name on it. He called it Bidenomics. So, for example, the president says, we're bringing down prices across the board. Actually, the cost of living is up 18% and climbing. Since Joe Biden took office, overall prices are up almost 18%, and it costs American families $11,400 more per year just to maintain the quality of life they had in January of 2021. Inflation also shows little sign of easing, with core inflation at a hot 4.8 annual rate. The inflation rate could go to zero, and Americans could be stuck with higher prices. Bidenomics actually means Bidenflation. The president tells us that wages are up after being adjusted for inflation. In fact, real wages and take-home pay are both down. Working Americans are making less under Joe Biden, with inflation-adjusted hourly wages down 2% across the board. Recent real wage increases have been more than offset by a decrease in the average work week. The result, well, since January 2021, real weekly earnings have shrunk 4.4%. Therefore, American paychecks are much lighter. For the first time, the number of hours worked by the average American has dropped to 34.4 hours per week, the lowest level in 10 years. That means that Americans are taking home less. And then the president insists that his economic plan is working. It's reducing the deficit. Well, the fact is, Joe Biden's reckless spending has sent the debt and the deficit soaring. Here are the facts. The national debt was $27.8 trillion when Joe Biden took office. It's now more than $34.2 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office projects that $2 trillion plus deficits will soon be the norm. Now, when you combine that with higher interest rates caused by inflation, American taxpayers last week paid more for interest on the national debt, that was $879 billion, than we spent on our national defense. In 10 years, The Congressional Budget Office projects 38 cents of every income tax dollar will go towards interest on the debt. Joe Biden tells him we're growing an economy from the middle out and the bottom up instead of the top down. Last night, he was attacking, once again, wealthier Americans, more successful Americans. But he says that Bidenomics is just another way of saying the American dream. If you ask me, it's more like a nightmare. Mounting debt, high interest rates are nobody's idea of the American dream. With more debt, higher interest rates, higher prices, the American dream is out of touch for too many Americans. Inflation, as always, hits the poor the hardest. 7% mortgage rates are pricing many middle-class families out of the housing market. The New York Fed actually reports household debts reaching a record high of $17.5 trillion. And then Joe Biden tells us we're literally reducing the cost of people being able to meet their basic needs. Not sure what planet this man is on. Under Bidenomics, it costs more to drive, more to work, and more to heat your home. Joe Biden's energy policies have hit Americans hard. Since coming into office, home heating oil is up 44%, gasoline is up 33%, electricity and natural gas are both up 29%. And the president's electric vehicle provisions in the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, well, they play right into China's hands, rewarding the Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers with U.S. taxpayer subsidies and pushing for mineral and technologies that China controls. Sure, the rate of inflation they claim is 3.4%. That's if you don't count the 784,000 Americans who stopped looking for work this past December, or if you don't count the 2 million Americans who stopped looking for work last year. These numbers are cooked, folks. Sure, if you look at the gross national product, the Biden administration will tell you that it's up. But if you look at the gross national income, yes, that's a real indicator, you will see that wages have been flat under the Biden administration. So in truth, Biden has nothing to run on. And that's why his entire speech this past week, his entire campaign seems to be nothing but an attack on his predecessor, Donald Trump. Interestingly, here's a statistical anomaly or a factoid. Donald Trump is on the cusp of being the first person in American history to be nominated by the Republican Party for the presidency 3 times. The only other person to achieve that goal was my mentor, Richard M. Nixon. And ironically, for the same reason. Nixon, of course, was the Republican nominee in 1960, a race that many, many people believe was stolen from him. I've written 2 books on that topic, Nixon's Secrets and Tricky Dick, The Rise and Fall and Rise of Richard M. Nixon. I actually had to crawl into the basement of a storage facility of the old New York Herald Tribune to find the microfiche files on an amazing 10-part series that ancient newspaper did on the theft of the 1960 election. Nixon, of course, made an incredible comeback in 1968 and was renominated and reelected in 1972. So it is with Trump, nominated in 2016, nominated again in 2020. And on Super Tuesday, where I was with him Super Tuesday night, he is just now short of his third nomination. Ironic that that nomination will come with the Florida primary. You see, Governor Ron DeSantis, who has withdrawn from the race, was required to remove his name from the ballot last December. He did not do so because he was still actively in the race. And therefore, on March 12th, there will be a face-off in the Sunshine State between Donald Trump and no longer a candidate, but still on the ballot, Governor Ron DeSantis. That means that we're still going to have a vote. But it is the votes of the Florida primary that will put Donald Trump, those delegates, over the top for his third presidential nomination. If you watched it, Senator Katie Britt from Mississippi gave the Republican response to the and frankly, it was, underwhelming. If this was her vice presidential audition, and I believe it was, based on some conversations I have had, well, I'm afraid the good senator failed. It is not that she didn't give it her best effort, but at 44 years old, and in a tone that was far too soft, given the slashing attacks on Donald Trump, she really did not rise to the moment. That's how politics is. This past week, we had the California primary. Now, this was interesting. California has this strange system where they've done away with the party primaries, and everybody of both parties runs in one initial primary. They call it the jungle primary. All Republicans, all Democrats run in one primary election, and the two top vote getters face off. Well, in this case, to everyone's surprise, the former L.A. Dodger and baseball great Steve Garvey was neck and pencil neck with a Congressman Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff now would, generally speaking, on paper at least, be favored to win in the November runoff. After all, the candidates who were second and third were Orange County progressive Congresswoman Katie Porter, followed by Bay Area Congresswoman African-American Barbara Lee. So one might argue that there was a majority of progressive votes, despite the fact that surprise finish of Garvey. But there is a fly in the ointment. It is interesting to me that Congressman Adam Schiff's victory remarks were marred by protesters demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. This is evidence of deep cleavages in the Democratic primary. This would be cleavages specifically, I think, among the supporters of Congressman Barbara Lee, the Congresswoman from the Bay Area. So I would not count on pencil neck being a sure bet for the U.S. Senate. You remember Adam Schiff. He's the guy who told us on March 22nd, 2017, on Meet the Press, that he could say that he has seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Russian intelligence services and Donald Trump's campaign. I can't go into the particulars, he said, as if he's a man who never leaks. But of course, we know today that Adam Schiff has never produced anything. Actually, his standard line is, well, we know that the Russians offered the Trump campaign help. the Trump campaign issue accepted that help, and the Trump campaign utilized that help. That, like Adam Schiff, is a bald-faced lie. Hopefully, the voters of California will realize that if it's Schiff, they just need to flush it. This is Roger Stone. You're here for the Roger Stone Show, and, well, we'll be right back.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. Now would be an excellent time for you to go to the App Store and download the 77 WABC Radio app so you don't miss any of the amazing programming that we have here in the crown jewel of AM radio. With President Donald Trump continuing to lead in all the polls, will the next election be free, fair, and transparent? That's really the question I am asked the most. Joining us today to talk about that is whether there's actually a plan afoot to stop Donald Trump from returning to the White House by both legal and extra-legal means. Mel K of the Mel K Show joins us to talk about that. You're not going to want to miss that. And then Joe Pags, Joe Pagliarulo, a giant of AM radio who, yes, once worked right here at 77 WABC and is now syndicated on 75 stations across the country, interviewed President Donald Trump last week, and he's going to join us to talk about that. He's also going to talk to us about the vice presidency and how he sees that shaking out. Really looking forward to that discussion. And then, of course, the tsunami of lawfare against President Donald Trump will continue here in New York very shortly. Up next, the Manhattan trial led by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. This is where Donald Trump is accused of making hush money payments. Now, in my opinion, and the opinion of most lawyers I respect, at best, this was a business records case, but it has been bumped up to a felony, and it promises, because it involves the allegations of hush money payments to a porn star and the testimony of the very controversial Michael Cohen. I think this trial is going to be quite colorful, maybe even salacious. It is interesting that federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York examined this case and elected not to bring it. Joining us to talk about that and also the immunity case before the U.S. Supreme Court, the recent decision by the Supreme Court not to allow Donald Trump's name to be barred from the ballot, essentially in any state, and the outlook for the so-called documents trial in Florida and the January 6th trial in Washington, D.C. is Will Scharf. Will Scharf is one of President Trump's lawyers. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's also a Republican candidate for the office of Attorney General of Missouri. I heard him on a podcast this past week. I was so incredibly impressed. I just had to get him on today on the Roger Stone Show. So you have that to look forward to. I do want to report that yet again, I am working on the 77 WABC Roger Stone Show cookbook. This was actually the idea of Margot Katzimatidis, and it is a great idea indeed. Now, I am by ethnicity half Sicilian and half Hungarian, which means, well, I'm very, very sentimental when I stab you in the chest. No, just joking. But the truth of the matter is that everything I know about cooking, I simply learned by watching my mother. Now, people say, well, wait a minute. Almost all your recipes, your marinara sauce, your Sunday gravy, your chicken parmesan, all of the great recipes that we've talked about here on the Roger Stone Show, they're all Italian. But your last name is Stone. That's not very Italian sounding. Well, here's how it worked, folks. When my grandfather came from Sicily to the United States, he went through Ellis Island. His name was Corbo, Corbo, from the village of Corvo in Sicily. Somewhere along that got slightly bastardized, but a friendly clerk at Ellis Island said, you're going to be Stone. So I am proud of my Italian heritage, and it will be reflected in my 77 WABC Stone Show cookbook, which I candidly am hard at work on. I got a very nice letter from Terry Long of St. Louis, who wrote me to ask me, how did you get started in politics? Good question. Well, let's see, in 1964, I was living in, actually at that point in northern Westchester, right there within the 77 WABC listening area, and I wanted to be an actor. My parents took a pretty dim view of this. They knew that I would starve to death. My dad urged me to go into the trades, become an electrician, a plumber, a drywall man. But then our next door neighbor gave me a copy of a book called The Conscience of a Conservative by Senator Barry Goldwater. I read that book and I was transfixed. I knew from that moment that I wanted to be in politics, not as a candidate, but as someone who worked to elect the men and women that I believed in. You see, what Goldwater stood for was what I stood for. He was a staunch anti-communist, part of my family having come from Hungary and having been mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. I was an ardent anti-communist, still am, but also the idea of small, inobtrusive government, personal privacy, a strong national defense as a deterrent to war, not as a provocation of war. So I was a fanatical 12-year-old Goldwaterite. And then in 1966, I managed the campaign of a man named John Lupton, who ran for the state senate in Connecticut in a district that included New Canaan, Darien, Wilton, Weston, and Westport. At that time, it had to be one of the wealthiest districts in the country, and Lupton was a Goldwater conservative taking on the Republican establishment. To this day, that is among the campaigns that I am proudest of, because it is the campaign in which I learned the most. By the way, the incumbent, a man named Robert Bliss, retired. John Lupton took on the candidate endorsed by every single one of the Republican town committees in the district, and we beat them. If there are any old colleagues from the Lupton campaign out there in our listener area, I would love to hear from you. This is among my fondest political memories. Also note this past week that the Italian American Civil Rights League, the oldest civil rights organization promoting Italian culture and heritage in the country, announced that their Joe DiMaggio Community Service Award will go to Joe Piscopo this year. Very proud of the fact that Joe follows me here with Sundays with Sinatra right here at 77 WABC. Folks, if you like what we're doing here, you want to get the heads up on what's coming up every week on our 77 WABC radio show, or if you want a portal that'll take you to the 77 WABC radio app, please go to stonezone.com. Stonezone.com. You can subscribe there. It is absolutely free, and you can keep in touch with everything coming up on The Roger Stone Show every Sunday from 4 to 6. So now, buckle your seatbelts, because as Jackie Gleason used to say, away we go.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is indeed The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, so I ask you again, please go to the App Store and download the 77 WABC Radio app to your cell phone so you don't miss any of the amazing programming that we have here, both in terms of talk and entertainment. You don't want to miss any of it. As President Trump continues to be indicted or charged for the incidents leading up to and following the 2020 election, it's important to understand the far-reaching attempts to stop Trump from winning election in 2020 and now afoot to prevent him from being successful again in 2024. The Transition Integrity Project was a program funded and created by a larger organization called Project Democracy. The Transition Integrity Project conducted a series of political scenario exercises in June of 2020, just 5 months before the 2020 presidential election. These political scenario exercises conducted by the so-called Transition Integrity Project in June of 2020 were a blueprint, even a guide to exactly what would happen. The working group here included both former and then current government officials. Well, now it's all beginning again. The same people, the same plan, the same MO. Here to talk about that is my good friend Mel K. Mel K of the Mel K Show, one of the hottest net-based shows out there, a good friend and a woman who knows this scary subject and exactly what they have planned better than perhaps anyone in the country. Mel K, thank you for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you for having me, Roger. It's so important that people understand the bigger picture here and that we are walking right into a second crossfire hurricane if we don't all open our eyes and start going on the offense and calling these people out.
It's amazing to me how completely brazen they have been this time. In other words, look, I was a victim of the Russian collusion hoax, despite what they'll continue to tell you at MSNBC. The government never found any evidence of WikiLeaks collaboration or Russian collusion on my part. I did nothing wrong other than perhaps reading things in the public domain and reposting them on my Twitter feed. Yeah, I followed Julian Assange and everything he said, and I essentially recycled it on my own Twitter feed. But for that, I was ultimately sentenced to 4 years in prison. I guess I was lucky. The prosecutors wanted to lock me up for 7 to 9. They said in the sentencing memo that I had been found guilty of foreign interference in our election. So in other words, they wanted to give me extra time for things that did not even happen. It is a nightmare from which my wife still hasn't recovered. Until you've had your home raided at 6 o'clock in the morning by 29 heavily armed FBI agents brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, when they could simply have contacted my lawyer the day before and asked me to turn myself in, well, you haven't really lived. My wife to this day still has night terrors. When anything goes bump in the night, she's convinced it's happening all over again. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Mel, these people have been extraordinarily brazen. So walk us through what they are doing and what they are saying.
Well, I think first and foremost, what you're talking about was actually started way before Crossfire Hurricane was initiated. It is the same people, obviously, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, the real architects of the lawfare that is coming after Trump. The persecutions of Trump are, again, the same exact people that were involved back then: Eisen, Weissman, Mary McCord. They, by any means necessary, will keep power. And we have to look at Mary McCord just last week gave an interview at what are the architects of what happened to you and to everyone else, the fake Russia hoax. Also involved in both impeachments and the fake Mueller report, which was about a Crossfire Hurricane investigation they knew was not real. We just found out a couple weeks ago that you and I had known for a long time, but that Brennan, for months before Crossfire Hurricane, was sending people around and spying on people involved in the Trump campaign, quote unquote, bumping them to create the illusion that there was interference or they were acting with the Russians. Wasn't true. Led to the Crossfire Hurricane Russia hoax. But Mary McCord last week is talking to, I call it Intel TV, MSNBC, saying that they're putting together a team to think through the most damaging types of things that Trump might do so that we're ready to bring lawsuits. You brought up one of the groups is Project Democracy. You know, they went into court 100 times during Trump's very early presidency to try to get him removed. Democracy Forward. Right now, what we have also is that all 4 cases against Trump, both New York cases, the D.C. cases, and the Georgia cases, are actually having their work product come from the same people. Norm Eisen and Andrew Weissman wrote memos prior to any of the indictments out of Brookings and Just Security, and then passed them down, I believe, through McCord and Monaco to the prosecutors that obviously do not have the talent, background, or education, let alone the integrity to be trying these false cases. The other thing we have to know is that one of the ways they got away with this, and we have to prepare, is yesterday on with I call her Nicole Bush Wallace on MSNBC had on Brennan again. Brennan said that they will not be sharing any intel, foreign intel, with Donald Trump if he becomes the nominee because he's a national security threat. And that's where it all comes from, in my opinion. We have to understand we have a 4th branch of government that is running, that is totally unconstitutional, is unaccountable, has no oversight. This was spawned from the unconstitutional, in my belief, Patriot Act. And it spawned all these new agencies. So this, I call it the intelligence community 4th branch of government, has basically captured all the others because they are surveilling, track and trace. They then, under Holder and Obama, they put in the National Security Division of the Department of Justice that teams up with DHS. And they've been working together basically in a full surveillance kind of net to try to pull in anyone and find anything they can. And a lot of that was done because of the warrantless surveillance by the 702, which they were just debating a few weeks ago, extending that after April 19th. Well, it's supposed to expire April 19th. If it is extended, the warrantless surveillance 702 program, believe me, they will be spying on Donald Trump, everyone in his campaign, and everyone involved, just like they did in Crossfire Hurricane, straight through into his presidency. And the bottom line of all of this is that these people committed sedition and treason, spying on a duly elected sitting president, and I believe many other people surrounding him in his cabinet and in Congress and Senate that were allies of Donald Trump the entire time. And because there was no consequences, no accountability, and this fourth branch of government gets to decide what is national security, what is not, what can be shared. Even James Comey said that they didn't share any intelligence or information with the president because it was sensitive information. That is not how it's supposed to work. There should not be a fourth branch of government that is an intel branch. And like I said, anyone that allows this 702 warrantless surveillance to go forward is aiding and abetting another Crossfire Hurricane going into the next election. And they're all out there talking about it. I mean, meanwhile, Moisman has gotten a TV show on MSNBC where he covers the Trump cases, knowing full well that him and Eisen wrote all of the lawfare behind it. So we are dealing with a very rogue situation and a captured government by a hell-bent, honestly funded by the globalist billionaire oligarch that would like America to fall. And here we are in America where they have turned the entire Patriot Act on the people that actually care about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the future of this nation.
That's a mouthful and a very, very good summation. Let's think about this just for a moment. You have John Brennan, who is no longer the CIA director, saying, if Trump is elected, we will not share intelligence information with the chief executive of the United States. How's that for arrogance? It is absolutely extraordinary. I read a piece this week in The Atlantic, where I admit that I am not a regular reader, entitled How Democrats Could Disqualify Trump If the Supreme Court Doesn't. Without clear guidance from the court, House Democrats suggest that they just might not certify a Trump win on January 6th. Wait a minute. Isn't that precisely what they're accusing Trump of today and claiming that it's a crime? The difference here between what Melke is talking about today and the Russian collusion hoax is the extent to which it is incredibly open. Mary McCord, just to clarify, who is a former government attorney now at Georgetown Law School, she's kind of the Forrest Gump of the Get Trump movement. She is involved in the Russian collusion hoax. She's deeply involved in both of the phony impeachment attempts. She's involved in January 6th. She's involved in all this tsunami of lawfare against Trump in New York, in Florida, in Georgia. She's actually giving interviews at MSNBC, openly talking about their plan to subvert democracy. The brazenness of the whole thing is what gets me, Mel.
Yeah, and we have to also, I mean, people have to start asking why. Why are all these people so hell-bent? I mean, it is astonishing, the obsession with Donald Trump that these people have been under, and it can't just be what it seems. And in my opinion, what we really have here is I call them the parent company of the United States of America. We have a billionaire oligarch class that goes all the way up to Larry Fink and Gates and Soros and all these people that are funding these NGOs that then fund all these people. So Brennan's saying we're not going to allow it. We essentially have a fifth column in America, mainly of Obama, holdovers and people in that realm that will do anything necessary to make sure that the American people do not have a voice or a vote. Because I will tell you, I go through all their white papers. I read what they're doing, all of these get out to vote programs, the Voter Protection Project. You spoke about the Transition Integrity Project. There's also CREW that has been going around the country suing anyone that wants election integrity at all. The real truth is they don't think that any American citizen, left or right, Republican and Democrat, deserve a vote or a voice. And my feeling is I see that Obama in 2015 signed on to this globalist governance Agenda 2030 plan, which is where all the Green New Deal, all the shutting down the energy, all of the track and trace surveillance, all the smart city technology, and I believe probably the pandemic is all coming out of that. And what they are doing is pushing us towards a place where we no longer have a constitution, a Bill of Rights, or a nation state known as the United States, where we are essentially global citizens. But to me, I believe that this oligarch of billionaires that are running everything through their, funding the lobbies, they're funding the fraudulent NGOs, funding the think tanks. Their whole goal is to get into this next post-America phase. They are running the controlled demolition of America because it benefits them. They've already basically cashed out of America. Most of them are involved in the World Economic Forum and the international banking reset. And the truth of the matter is that this has very little to do with Donald Trump. I believe what this has to do with is Donald Trump's voters, the people that are patriots, that believe in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, in our country's greatness, want us to be prosperous and self-sufficient and the great nation that we should be. And to these people, this billionaire class that has captured D.C. and captured our elections, they do not want that. They want us to be docile, to be compliant, and to not fight back, which is essentially what I believe January 6th was all about. And at the end of the day, they're pushing war after war, all of this. It's their whole model is goes back to Kissinger and Brzezinski and the whole Crown Rockefeller plan, which is basically order out of chaos. And they're creating as much chaos, as much division. We are in a color revolution funded and fueled by the same people who've done them all over the world, including CIA, National Endowment for Democracy. And what they really want is us to be so divided, so against each other, fighting each other in this fraudulent left-right dichotomy that they keep going, that we don't see them. And the American people need to realize 2024 is about ideology. It is not about Donald Trump or about Joe Biden. What it is about is, do you believe in the nation state and the United States of America still being exactly what our founders wanted? Or do you believe in us joining to be a cog in a wheel of a globalist international banking cartel run entity where we have no freedom, no privacy, track and trace surveillance? They're coming for our property. They put it in their own documents. I often tell people to go look at September 2023. It's still on the White House website. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden recommitting to global goals of Agenda 2030. If you go to that document on the White House website and you read down that document, you're going to see that they say every 17 development goal and then about $3 trillion of our money that they're going to be sending to globalist entities, including the UN and others, to all basically join us into a world government model that they've been going for 100 years. You can no longer say that that's a conspiracy theory because it's in all their paperwork, all their information. They no longer believe in nation states. They believe in global governance run by a public-private partnership, and the public is not us. The public are the handlers that they decide control us. So the American people need to unite right now, because we can maybe not agree on every issue that they throw at us, but we all should be able to agree in freedom and liberty. And that is what is on the ticket in 2024 in a very, very serious way.
Very, very well put. Look, politics is never about the past. It's always about the future. But you can't even imagine what it was like to wake up on January 20th, 2017, Inauguration Day, and to read a New York Times story above the fold that says that the intelligence agencies have under surveillance 3 Trump associates, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and Carter Page, over their communications with Russia. I find this particularly strange because I know I have had no communications with Russia. None. So for the next 2 years, I'm scratching my head trying to figure out what they're talking about. The New York Times, by the way, declined ever to retract that story. They said they had 3 impeccable sources, yet the government insisted, when I was actually tried over the totally fabricated charge of lying to Congress about WikiLeaks collaboration that never actually took place, they insisted that I was never under surveillance. Who should I believe? It's an extraordinary experience to be in this particular crossfire. Mel, let me ask you this. You talk all over the country. Your daily show is very, very influential. Before we go to break, and then we'll come back to you, are Americans waking up to this?
Absolutely. I mean, they are. And I think people at this point are so disgusted with everything. I don't think D.C. is salvageable. We have a lot of work to do. But honestly, Roger, and you're in the inside, this has to be done now. And I believe that we have an open door to a lot of people, legal immigrants. The Black community knows they were totally defrauded with the entire Black Lives Matter movement. We got people all over this country that realize that the border is open on purpose. This is not incompetence. We had the entire exit from Afghanistan. Everyone is seeing exactly what happened in Ukraine. You know, just last week, the intel agency-run New York Times puts out a whole thing about the CIA admitting that they had 12 military installations in Ukraine since 2009, 2014. So obviously everything we've been told is a lie. And Roger, the truth of the matter is, these people don't care that they're lying about you or anything else. They don't want the entire Julian Assange thing is a complete farce as well. They want power for power's sake only. This is straight out of 1984. And the question everyone should be asking is, why do these bullies and these entitled elitist poison Ivy League lawyers think that we the people don't deserve a voice or a vote? Because that is exactly what they believe.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. We're talking to the dynamic Mel K, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We're talking to the dynamic and largely informative Mel K, who hosts the Mel K Show every day of the week. Mel, first of all, tell people where they can hear or watch your show.
Okay, well, I have a live show every single night, 7 days a week on Rumble, and I am everywhere you find free speech, both audio and podcast, except for YouTube, because a long time ago, because I was telling the truth, YouTube had a problem with that, and I decided to abandon them and never go back. So everywhere else, and the MelKShow.com, where a lot of these things I talk about, I put the receipts on the resource page, and some of the things we're talking about today, including the Durham report, Horowitz report, the Mueller report. We cannot not understand what happened in those situations to really go forward and really see who is the enemy, who are we fighting, who is manipulating this country to be so divided, and why. And so that's what I do on the Mel K Show.
You were telling me in the break that you thought that the renewal of the 702 program, which is really the program that allows the government to spy on the average American citizen, should not be renewed. Now, by the FBI's own admission, there were over 4 million abuses of that program, 4 million searches on American citizens, and the FBI conducted 178,000 warrantless surveillances on Americans. Do you think this is the single most important thing, reform, I should say, that we need to pursue going forward?
Well, 100%. I mean, first and foremost, I think the worst thing that's happened to this nation and has allowed all of this is the Patriot Act. So I am all for repealing that. But on top of that, this warrantless 702 surveillance is a tool of the deep state, or as I call them, the fifth column, because they're even more nefarious than the deep state could ever be, to entrap people. The problem is, the war right now on Donald Trump is not about Trump. It's about the 80 million plus people that voted for Trump. We're the problem because we want want to have America continue to be a sovereign nation separate from the rest of the world that determines our own future. That is the problem. And people have to start understanding, a lot of times Donald Trump will say, they're not after me, they're after you, I'm in the way. The people of the United States, every citizen needs to understand, they're not after America, they're after the world, and America is in the way. So anyone that is facilitating America remaining as we were founded is a problem to these people. So the warrant list 702, there's also many other things that have come out of that, including there's a whole FBI, DHS partnership. It's a public-private partnership, again, through some of these think tanks, some of these other groups. Some of them are NGOs. We've mentioned a couple of them that have teamed up with corporations and banks. And certainly a lot of these NGOs and other things, they're keeping lists. And they're really looking at purchases of, they teamed up with the Treasury, everything. This is all coming out of the fourth branch, unconstitutional fourth branch of government that has to be dismantled, that was spawned. And the 702 warrantless surveillance is how that's where they got everything that they think they have. And then, these guys are lawfare experts. Lawfare is an evil tactic. It's warfare by law. And what they do is they create novel theories from actual laws. They manipulate them. And then, like what happened to you and everyone else, they leak them to their partners at CNN and New York Times and the Washington Post as before they come out, so that the public already is aware. It's kind of predictive programming. And they keep it going and keep it going and keep it going all through the lawfare process, even though you're innocent. It is to create the illusion, which is what they're going to do again. And I firmly believe that they're using the Jack Smith case to say that Donald Trump is a threat to national security. Therefore, they're going to need to renew. If it's renewed, it's April 19th, 702 is supposed to expire. If the Republicans do not block that and they allow that to continue, warrantless surveillance 702, they're going to put Trump and everyone surrounding him, everyone on his campaign, and everyone a hop from there, which is what happened to you and Carter Page, on surveillance full-time as threats to national security. And they're going to get away with it because all Merrick Garland has to do is sign a piece of paper. And then from then on, they will continue. The 702 needs to be stopped and stopped cold.
Yeah, they don't require any probable cause. They can just start spying on you. They don't place bugs like they used to in the old days. Their method of surveillance is far, far more sophisticated and much scarier. With about 2 minutes to go, Mel, you and I both concluded that the John Durham special investigation into the Russian collusion hoax was really a cover-up operation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, 100%. And people have to understand, first of all, when Weissman turned in his report to Barr then really hired Durham a long time before the public was made aware of it. We weren't made aware of Durham being involved until after the election. But what it appears, and Donald Trump said a couple of times, I don't know Bill Barr. He's a good guy. Well, don't forget who suggested Bill Barr. I believe Chris Christie and a couple other people that were obviously in there as opposition to Trump the whole time. But the bottom line is, Mueller said on the stand that he wasn't allowed to look into his purview. Of course, they're allowed. They can do whatever they want. But to keep it a cover-up, this is how you know. He wasn't allowed to look into the origins, he said, of Crossfire Hurricane, which means the meeting in Obama's office that Susan Rice wrote the letter on. Susan Rice was running the National Security Division. That includes everything that happened with bumping people off, with, the whole Mifsud and everything that happened with Papadopoulos. Mueller claims that they were not allowed to look into that at all. So then that's a fake report. Then Durham says he wasn't allowed to look into the Mueller team, any of the Mueller work product, or anyone involved with Mueller, or anyone inside the United States government, which is where it was coming from Comey and McCabe and Clapper and all those people. Durham wasn't allowed to look at that. He said he was only allowed to look at outside. So Fusion GPS, DNC, Hillary campaign, but never got to look at under the hood, which was really the FBI, DHS, CIA, and all these people that we know were involved. None of them were held accountable. None of them were called out. And it's time that we do that. on the offense, point to them. They have all their, Media Matters. All these people are always putting people like you out there on the front lines to be, in this firing squad. Well, it's time to lift up the people in the shadows on the left that are working for these globalist billionaires by name, so that everyone in the United States of America knows that these elitist, poison Ivy League, globalist-funded people believe that the American people don't deserve a say, don't deserve a vote, don't deserve a voice, and certainly don't deserve what our Constitution provides.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Let me thank my guest, Mel K at the Mel K Show, for joining us today on 77 WABC Radio. God bless you, Mel.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio. You can listen to us worldwide at WABCradio.com. So there's never an excuse to miss a minute of the great programming or entertainment here at 77 WABC Radio. Joining me now is one of the giants of radio, Joe Pagliarulo, better known as Joe Pags, has had an amazing career in radio. He's won multiple Associated Press awards for excellence in journalism. He is a strong voice who never, ever leaves any doubt about what he thinks or where he stands. He's a mainstay, a staple in San Antonio, Texas. He's become a very, very good personal friend, and I am honored to have Joe Pags join us on the Roger Stone Show now.
Roger, the honor is all mine. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So we'll get into this in a moment. You, over this past week, had two extraordinary interviews, including an interview with President Donald Trump, who ironically was our very, very first guest here on the Roger Stone Show, but also one with Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat, now an independent, speculated by some as being a potential vice presidential candidate. But before we get into any of that, I want to talk about the power of radio. People, I think, in our society today, I think they misunderstand or undervalue the power of radio as a medium, particularly as a medium when you want to reach very specific people. You've been in the industry for decades. Talkers Magazine has repeatedly rated you as one of the heavy 100. That means one of the most influential voices in talk radio. Talk to us about the medium and how it is today, how you think it has changed, and what's the impact on the American people?
Boy, so much has changed. I started in 1989, so 35 years now. And I did television for a long time in between. That's where I won all those awards that you mentioned. I appreciate you mentioning that. But radio is the mainstay. I think that the death of radio has been predicted probably 30 million times, and it just doesn't go away. Then they try to take AM radio out of cars. That didn't make any sense, so it won't go away. People still like to be able to relate to Roger Stone when they turn on 77 WABC. They still want to relate to me when they turn on one of my 170 stations across the country. Ironically or coincidentally, Roger, I love WABC. When I was a television news anchor in Albany, Schenectady, Troy, New York, I actually called the program director at WABC, and I said, hey, put me on the air. He said, okay, tough guy, come on down. And I came down, and I did a show on Saturday morning. I was filling in for a guy who was off. So my first sort of foray back into radio from TV was on WABC. But the impact of this station specifically, I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I remember the first radio station I heard was this one. And the impact it had on me as a guy who wanted to end up doing that eventually as a career, it's something I'll never forget. But has it changed? Yes. Is the audience a little bit older? Yeah, because you can digitally get a lot of these online, just like you said in the beginning. Go to the website, you can listen to it worldwide. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a guy or a gal sitting into a microphone talking about interesting things, and if it's interesting enough, the audience will stay there. No matter how they're consuming it, radio still is where it starts. It's still the nucleus of the atom, if you will, when it comes to information. And I love that we're a part of it.
Yeah, I could not agree more. The idea that Ford, General Motors, Tesla actually floated the idea that their next generation of vehicles would be without an AM radio receiver, which is, by the way, extraordinarily inexpensive for them. Our leader here, John Catsimatidis, took a very aggressive stand against that, spoke out publicly, went to Washington, called important legislators, and I'm happy to say, thanks largely to his efforts, they backed off. The emergency broadcast system, which the country still relies on, is based in AM radio. So it was an incredibly counterproductive and not even a cost-efficient idea. I love radio, and frankly, I love the feedback I get from being here every Sunday. It lasts all week. We'll talk about something here on the Roger Stone Show, and I'll get text messages, emails, even letters in the mail about it for days. The impact is very, very real. Have you ever seen the media role as antagonists, as not people who cover the news, but people who are constantly proselytizing and putting forward their own narrative as we see today?
It's a great question, and I want to get to that in a second. Let me just say, John Catsimatidis came on my show when the whole AM radio thing was going on, and he was amazing in how he stood up for people like you and me because of the information that we bring. And he also stood up for the fact that, yes, Americans still rely on the emergency broadcast system. So he did an incredible job, the boss at WABC, in keeping us on the air and telling the automakers that was a really nice try, but it's not going to work. When it comes to Andrea Mitchell, what I saw yesterday, Roger, not only did she just allege that, okay, forget the polling, forget your lying eyes, she also, I don't know if you saw this part, where she looked visibly upset that Nikki Haley was dropping out. She looked visibly upset that it looks like Donald Trump is going to be the nominee now. And we all knew that going in. There really was no question that he was going to be the nominee. But when you see MSNBC and you see them take a stance like, the polling that we just reported is not true, which is just stupid. But they'll also say, we're not going to run a speech from the former president who just won almost every state in a landslide on Super Tuesday. We're not going to run what he's got to say because journalistically we can't fact check him as he goes. Roger, have you ever seen in your life? Because, listen, I covered the 2000 election extensively when you had Al Gore arguing for 36 days that he didn't lose, and you had George W. Bush called early, and then they rescinded Florida and so on. I've never seen anywhere near this sort of antagonism, this sort of animosity towards a candidate. Andrea Mitchell's job, she's made her millions on reporting the story. Barbara Walters would never have done what Andrea Mitchell and Leslie Stahl are doing when it comes to Donald Trump. So, yeah, I did see that, and I also saw the look on her face where she looked visibly ill that she now has to admit that Trump is the guy, and he's probably going to win in November.
Yeah, I love that 60 Minutes interview in which the longtime broadcaster Leslie Stahl tries to tell President Trump, there's no evidence that your campaign was spied on, none whatsoever. But here's the best part. We're 60 Minutes. We can't just report things that aren't true. Well, Joe, we now know definitively, based on the report by Special Counsel John Durham, and also the conclusions, sadly, of Robert Mueller's investigation, that the Trump campaign was spied on. The denial by those in the mainstream media is really extraordinary.
Well, Roger, let me just add to what you just said. On the day he was inaugurated, the New York Times had a headline on the front page saying that they were surveilling Trump Tower. I mean, it's right there. That sort of floated away somehow. She also argued that Hunter Biden's laptop, there was no evidence that it was real and that it was somehow Russian disinformation. If you go back and look at that interview, Trump handled her so well, and he was so right in everything that he said. But what really is telling for anybody listening in the audience right now, don't go to bed without this in the back of your head. Leslie Stahl, nor CBS, nor 60 Minutes has ever apologized, has ever retracted, has ever said, hey, man, we got that one wrong. Don't ever take anything they say as news or truth again until they come to the highest mountain with the loudest megaphone saying he was right, we were wrong, we should have done more research and done better reporting on that. But Roger, they're never going to admit that, are they?
No, they really aren't. Listen, I'm very familiar with what you speak of. Imagine waking up on January 20th, 2017. It's inauguration day. Donald Trump's about to be sworn in. It's a very happy day for my wife and my family and I. We are in Washington for the inauguration. And I read a story above the fold on page 1 of the New York Times that says that I am one of 3 individuals, along with Paul Manafort and Carter Page, who are under federal surveillance for our contacts with the Russians. And of course, I know I haven't had any contacts with the Russians. I called the New York Times reporters who wrote that story. And of course, they can't and wouldn't reveal their sources, but they insist to this day that the story was accurate. It totally and completely contradicts what Lesley Stahl was trying to tell us. And then, as you know, because we talked about this just a few days ago, we learned very recently that CIA Director John Brennan, presumably at the behest of the Obama administration, went to the intelligence agencies of the Five Eyes, the so-called 5 English-speaking nations, to ask their intelligence services to start surveilling and bump, that means entrap, 26 individual supporters or advisors to Donald Trump, among whom I was one. Now, nobody is going to pay any price for this. It's highly illegal. It's highly unusual as well. But there will be no consequences for that, will there?
Well, Roger Brennan and James Comey and Andrew McKay, these Peter Strzok, they're all walking around free. And your name was sullied. They never apologized in the news media. I think the government owes you tons of money for the illegal activity they were pulling just to try to get you to turn on Donald Trump. Listen, Roger, we talked about this over dinner. If you would have turned on Donald Trump, you would have been scot-free. You would have been the darling of the media. You would have gotten $1 million offers from all the networks to come on there and be some sort of a Michael Cohen. But the fact is, you stand on truth. You stand on fact. You stand on your friendship and relationship with Donald Trump, and you knew there was no Russia collusion. You knew there was no involvement whatsoever by Russia. And all of these agencies, listen, John Brennan should be behind bars. Clapper should be behind bars. So should Jim Comey. Instead, they're writing books and making money as contributors. What they did to you and to Papadopoulos and what they did to Carter Page, that they didn't even know he was working for the government when they were surveilling him. It's so stupid. The whole thing that they did, they can't possibly come out and tell the truth, Roger, because then they're going to have egg on their faces for all of time. So they're still pretending that there was still something there when there wasn't anything there. And I feel for a guy like you, because how do you clear your name? Now, you have with me, and anybody who's got a brain, of course, you're Roger Stone, the honest guy, and didn't do anything wrong. But there is a segment of the population in this country that still thinks you're somehow a bad guy because all the lies they told about you. It makes me sick.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And of course, I had the added problem of being gagged by a federal judge, so I couldn't even defend myself. Anyway, let's move to more important and much happier topics. Normally speaking, when one looks for a vice president, Richard Nixon once told me, don't look for someone who can help you, just look for someone who doesn't hurt you. Which is kind of ironic because in his 2 choices, Spiro Agnew in 1968 and Senator Henry Cabot Lodge in 1960, a case could be made that in both cases, unlike Jack Kennedy, who chose Lyndon Johnson, who did help him dramatically, that the 2 candidates chosen by Nixon were probably not helpful to him. As we look forward, obviously, President Trump has a very, very difficult decision to make. He has to choose someone who, first and foremost, is fully qualified, that based on experience and temperament and judgment, has the ability to run the country, has the ability, if, God forbid, something should happen to Donald Trump, or he cannot fulfill his term, this person has what it takes to run the country. Secondarily, he needs somebody who is fully committed to the America First agenda, to the Trump non-interventionist agenda, so that there will be no temptation by those in the deep state to either remove him through illicit means. I've written a book on the Kennedy assassination. I know what I'm talking about. Where do you think the president should go in terms of a running mate? Does he choose somebody who is safe, assuming they meet all those other criteria? Does he choose somebody who is safe, meaning they don't bring you any new votes, but they please your base? Or do you think he has to go outside the norms of politics and choose somebody who will bring some voter group or have an appeal to some voter group that he does not yet have behind him?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to offer three people up. And I think that these are the three top in my mind. And one of them makes people mad, but you and I agree on this one that I'm going to talk about. I think Ben Carson would be a perfect vice president. I think Ben Carson has the temperament you need to counterbalance the president's, A-type personality. Ben Carson will walk into a room, and you want to shut up and listen to him. He's that intellectual, but he really, really, really loves this country. Plus, he grew up as a very, very poor guy in Detroit. I think he brings the Midwest in. He tells that story well enough, and he's done it many times on my show. I think that his history as the premier neurosurgeon on the planet, coming from where he came from, is a story that a lot of people in this country need to hear. The second one is Tulsi Gabbard, that you and I have talked about a lot. I like Tulsi a lot. I had an extended interview with her this week, about 20 minutes, 22 minutes, and man, she's saying the right things. And when people question her bona fides or bona fides as a conservative and somebody who's no longer a Democrat, I asked her every question you want to ask her, and she gave me the straight answer, and the straight answer was, listen, I walked away from that side because they've gone nuts. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent, but I want to see President Trump in that office. She also is the smartest person I've talked to when it comes to Ukraine and not being the interventionist that you were talking about and not being the police officer of the world. She reminded me a lot interviewing her as Rand Paul. But here's somebody with military experience. Here's somebody who's still a lieutenant colonel as we speak. And here's somebody who I think can bring in a completely different audience that is moderate, that even leans a little bit left and leans a little bit right. And she's saying the right things on the issues right now. And the wild card, Roger, for me is Vivek Ramaswamy. Here's a guy that is a billionaire, has run corporations very, very well. He's young. He's in his 30s. And he brings in an energy about America that I haven't seen in a long time. Now, a lot of people question, does he have Soros ties? Does he have WEF, this and that? I'm not worried about that because he's covered all of that on my show and probably with you as well. But here's a guy that I think could bring in a completely younger audience at a time where maybe our side of the aisle needs that. I wonder what you think about those three choices. I know you like Tulsi. I know you know all of them. I just wonder what you think about it.
Excellent question. I like all three. By the way, if I had to make up a short list, this would be my short list. Ben Carson's a good man. He's solid. He's dependable. He is most definitely committed to the Trump agenda. I think there's a huge advantage, and I think you figured this out. What do those three people all have in common? Well, they've all run for president themselves. That means they know how it works. They know that the jackals in the fake news media are going to be out from the very first second of you, after you've been named as the nominee, to try to trick you, to try to get you to make a mistake, to try to get you to somehow contradict the presidential candidate that you're on the ticket with. So I would be extraordinarily comfortable with Ben Carson. Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show. I'm here with Joe Pags, Joe Pagliarulo, one of the giants of talk radio, and we'll be right back with more of Joe Pags.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. Don't touch that dial. We are here with Joe Pags, Joe Pagliarulo, who is one of the giants of talk radio. And Joe, you just had an interview with President Donald Trump. I admit to you that I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but I'm certainly going to. I'm very honored to say that the very first show we had here at 77 WABC Radio was a wide-ranging interview with President Trump. I got to ask him, for example, about UFOs and whether they really exist. It was a great interview. Tell us about your time with President Trump.
It's interesting because I went back and counted it, Roger. This is the 14th interview I've done with him, which is kind of crazy to me. Donald Trump is a very smart man. He's a great businessman, was an incredible president, and getting him to trust you is something that takes a minute. He's not stupid. So when I first had him on back in 2015, when he first started running, there was a little bit of apprehension there. Now we just laughed and we talked like a couple of guys. He's one thing that people listening don't understand about Donald Trump, unless you've spoken with him, is that he's a really nice man. He just is. He's a nice guy. And nobody knew this, but I'll tell you, you're the one person that will nationally know this. Before we started, I lost my father-in-law recently, and I asked him if he could say a word to my mother-in-law, and he did. He did it on tape for me, and I gave it to her, and it made her entire life that President Trump would do something like that. I think people think he's always hard around the edges, and he's not. He's a very nice guy when you sit down and personally talk to him. So I started the interview off just because he probably had done 4 interviews before me, and the media's treating him like garbage. He's in court all the time. My first question, Roger, was, will you sell me Mar-a-Lago for $18 million? And I said, come on, you're a deal maker. I'll give you $18 million right now. And he laughed, and then we talked about Letitia James and how ridiculous she is, how she ran to target one American, and that sort of set the tone, I think, for the entire interview. It went about 16, 17 minutes, and we covered just about everything we possibly could. What I took away from that, and you know this because you still go and see him all the time and you're very close with him, he's still energized, and I don't get it. He's still ready to go. I don't get it. This guy can ride around in a golden golf cart for the rest of his life if he wants and never do any of this again, and all of this prosecution would go away. All the persecution would go away immediately. But he doesn't because he loves the country. He's the one president in my lifetime that lost money as the president of the United States, and he doesn't seem to care. And I've asked him 30 times, and so have you, why do you keep doing this? And he does it because he's afraid for the future of the country, for his kids, his grandkids, and for all of us. And what really jumps out at me about Donald Trump every time I speak to him, because he's a very, very rich, very successful guy. He reminds me of my father because he's a blue-collar guy. He's blue-collar guy who's got billions of dollars. If you can have the two in one guy, you've got it with Donald Trump. He does understand workers. He does understand labor unions. He does understand minorities. He does understand people that are downtrodden or those who are on the way up. And that's what I always take away. Now, there are specific things that we talked about in the interview, and I hope that you'll listen to it. Maybe your audience can go to rumble.com/JoePags and go watch it there. But the bottom line for me is I always walk away going, he's a nice guy who gets it, and he's in a stratosphere financially where he doesn't have to get it, but he does, if that makes sense.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. He's a billionaire who has never lost his touch for the regular people. He's a billionaire from Queens, New York. I can tell you, if you gave him a choice of having dinner with a group of cab drivers or a group of plumbers or having dinner with a group of Fortune 500 CEOs, I know which one he would choose. There's nothing phony about him. There's no artifice. There's no acting as you see so often in politics. Look, I worked for presidents. I've been active in over 700 political campaigns. Almost every one of those candidates had a private persona and a public persona, and they were completely different. That is not true of Donald Trump. He's the same guy you see on TV, the same guy you hear on the radio, that you meet in person. There's only one Donald Trump, and he's completely genuine. In other words, there's nobody giving him talking points. There's no handler. There's no manager. There's no puppeteer. It's all him. He's very, very strong-willed. I think, in a way, his stubbornness is his absolutely greatest quality. So when he became president, they said, well, Mr. President, the Paris Climate Accords, I know you said we were going to pull out, but you realize we can't really do that. He said, no, we're doing it. Oh, Mr. President, they said, we know you said that you were going to cancel the Iranian arms deal in which we were paying Iran billions of dollars to build nuclear weapons behind our backs. But you understand that the deal is already signed, that we really can't do that. He said, no, we're absolutely doing it. So when they made him, they broke the mold. To me,
well, Roger, I've got to interject this because you forgot one, and that's really important. You didn't forget it; you just didn't mention it. He said he would move the capital, our embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and 12 presidents said that before him, and he actually did it. They said, "You're not really going to do that. That would make a complete war break out in the Middle East." He did it. He opened it, and not only wasn't there a war, you had the Abraham Accords, and you had all sorts of more peace happening in the Middle East. So, I mean, to your point. The guy literally thought that he had to do what he said he would do, and then he did it. Whereas other people who ran for office said, I don't have to do that. I got the office now. Well, why would I have to follow through? The guy really followed through, which blows my mind.
The last point is just his innate toughness. I mean, under that kind of entertaining and sometimes self-deprecating exterior, I worked for Richard Nixon. He was a very, very tough guy. He clawed his way back from political defeat. Great political comeback. I worked for Senator Bob Dole, hit by a shell in Italy during World War II, told that he'd never walk again. He'd never have the use of his arms or his legs again.
By the way.
Never dress himself again. Nursed him back to health. Would have been a great president. I must tell you, Donald Trump, tougher than either one. The toughest man I know. This is the man I want leading America. This is the man I want speaking for America. All right. Well, unfortunately, we could do this for the rest of the day, and I would love it, but we are out of time. I want to thank Joe Pagliarulo, one of the giants of radio in this country. Folks, go to rumble.com/Joe Pags to listen to all of my friends' work. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's an absolute honor. This is one of the best talk shows on the planet, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
God bless you.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on this beautiful Sunday here at 77 WABC Radio. Now we are privileged to have with us Will Scharf. Will is a former federal prosecutor. He is a graduate of Princeton University and the Harvard Law School. He clerked for 2 federal appellate court judges, is a candidate for Attorney General in the Republican primary of this upcoming August in his home state of Missouri. But he also served in the Trump administration, and now he is among those lawyers helping President Donald Trump against the tsunami of lawfare that he is confronted with. When they can't beat a man at the ballot box in a free, fair, honest, transparent election, well, it seems they have to resort to a strategy of weaponization of our criminal justice system. I myself have been through this, lived through it, so perhaps I understand it better than others. But Will Scharf, thank you so much for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
It's really great to be with you, Roger. Thanks so much for having me on.
So I was very happy to hear that you're working with the president's other lawyers. He is certainly facing a number of obstacles in a very strange way. I think in a counterintuitive way. These unfair and baseless attacks on him have turbocharged his campaign. Now, I'm not, like you, a lawyer. I'm a political operative. I study the data. I study it in finite degree, looking at every subset of voters and comparing polls and so on. And I must say, I've known Donald Trump for 45 years. He has never been stronger or more popular than he is in this exact instant. And just reading the political tea leaves, it appears to me that he is on the cusp of actually pulling off the greatest single political comeback in American history. And therefore, they resort to the courts to try to derail him. Let's kind of start with the recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that held essentially that states did not have the authority to bar a federal candidate from the ballot in a candidacy, in this case, for president. Does it disturb you that the court's ruling was so incredibly narrow and that they did not address the question of whether his alleged, in this case, involvement in insurrection, notably a crime for which he has not been charged or convicted, might prohibit him from actually holding the office? In other words, are we going to see this matter relitigated?
You know, Roger, it's a concern, but I think it's a relatively small concern. If you read the per curiam opinion, the majority opinion closely, they seem to foreclose any possibility of that absent new legislation by Congress, which is just quite simply not going to happen. We were very excited that this was a unanimous opinion. I think it's very important that the court spoke with one voice in striking down these outrageous efforts, not just to deprive President Trump of his ability to run for office, but also the ability of all of us to vote for a candidate of our choice next November. So it was a great win. It's good that it was unanimous. And I think any concerns down the road are relatively minor. We were very happy with the way the Supreme Court came down on that.
The hysteria that we have seen on the left, particularly the talking heads on MSNBC, some of their heads actually almost exploded on the air, not only about the decision on the question of ballot access in the Colorado case, but just the court's agreement to take the question of presidential immunity was almost entertaining to watch. Now, there was a lot of criticism of one of your colleagues who, when asked whether if SEAL Team 6 was ordered by President Donald Trump to assassinate his political opponent and then I think go on to assassinate any senator or congressman who favored impeachment of the president, whether the president would have immunity for those crimes. That is not the entire argument, obviously, for immunity. But what did you think of that question? What did you think of the answer? And do you want to put that in a different perspective, perhaps?
Sure. The only thing we've argued from the start here, Roger, is that for presidential acts, for acts that fall within the outer perimeter of a president's responsibilities as president, a president currently has civil immunity. The Supreme Court has recognized that. You can't sue a president over his official acts. We believe that the same applies in the criminal context, that unless a president is first impeached and convicted by the House and Senate, you can't criminally prosecute him for official acts that fall within the outer perimeter of a president's responsibilities as president. That's the system that the Constitution sets up. That system has been, I believe, upheld by the courts going back to Marbury v. Madison, where Chief Justice John Marshall said that the court simply cannot sit in judgment over a president's official acts. The constitutional process is for impeachment and conviction to occur before any further redress in the courts through the criminal law is possible. The SEAL Team 6 question is a tough one. It was sort of a gotcha question. But what the judge is really asking is, can you prosecute a president for orders that he gives to the military unless he's first impeached and convicted? And the answer to that is no. The same way that we can't prosecute for Barack Obama for drone strikes that killed American citizens unless he was first impeached and convicted. You can't prosecute President Trump for orders that he gave to the Department of Justice, for communications that he had with members of Congress, with state officials. That's at the core of this case. These are presidential acts. The president should have immunity. He was impeached but not convicted. Therefore, criminal prosecution can't proceed. This is not a particularly radical view of the law. We think our arguments are very strong, and the leftist freakout notwithstanding, I think we're going to have a great day at the court in late April when we argue this thing.
Very, very well put. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is something I have wondered about. The upcoming trial in Manhattan of under the leadership of Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, a case that the Southern District of New York, hardly lovers or supporters of President Donald Trump, looked at and declined to prosecute. I think this will be different than the recent evaluations case, which was a much, much easier case for people to understand. Look, Donald Trump and his real estate company, including executives of the company who were members of his family, borrowed money from banks for real estate development projects. They put up collateral for those loans. The banks conducted their own independent appraisal of the value of that collateral. They decided the loans were good. They lent the Trump Organization the money. They got paid back, not only on time, but in some cases a little early, and they made $40 million in interest on their loans. No victim, no crime, no complainant other than Attorney General Letitia James. I actually think, even though that has been horrifically expensive for the president because they're demanding an exorbitant bond just so he can appeal, I still think from a political point of view, from a public relations point of view, particularly since the president was able to step out in the hallway and tell the American people what was really going on, that whole circus, as distasteful as it was, well, I think it was politically advantageous to the president, even though it was very painful. The upcoming, I'm not sure even what we want to call it, the business documents case, it may be a different kettle of fish. First of all, the last time I looked, they were trying to gag the president so he could not defend himself during the proceedings. And then I'm not really sure, maybe you can help me here, what is the alleged crime? I'm not seeing the alleged crime.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Roger. First of all, I think the American people see what's going on here and understand what's going on here. This is an unprecedented campaign of lawfare with a single objective, which is interfering with President Trump's ability to run for office. That's what is going on here. The law is almost secondary to that as the objective. In terms of this New York DA case, as you said, the Biden Department of Justice declined to prosecute President Trump for this. That they've been willing to run roughshod over the law in other jurisdictions, all in their efforts to get Trump. With this case, they looked at it and thought, justifiably so, that there simply was not a case to bring. So Alvin Bragg has brought this case. It relies largely on testimony by known perjurer Michael Cohen. And the basic allegation is that expenses were booked incorrectly. There's sort of a campaign aspect to it because they said that the reason these payoffs were going to Stormy Daniels was to protect the Trump campaign, which is not well-founded in the facts. So this is a very weird case that was strung together by the political allies of Joe Biden in order to interfere with President Trump's ability to run for office. We're going to mount a vigorous defense. I'll be in New York in late March helping out with the trial team who are going to be actually trying this thing. But at the end of the day, what we have to remember is that the objective here is forcing President Trump to sit in court defending himself instead of doing what he does best, which is taking his message to the American people. And that's an outrageous abuse of our legal system. It's an outrageous abuse of the courts. It's an outrageous violation of what we consider to be, the rule of law and the way that elections are supposed to be conducted in this country. And I'm certainly hopeful that President Trump, at the end of the day, will be vindicated both in court and at the ballot box next November.
Former U.S. Attorney General Ed Meese, who served President Ronald Reagan, one of my old bosses, has filed an amicus brief with two distinguished law school professors, neither one of whom is a Trump supporter, but arguing that the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith is illegal, that he was not confirmed by the U.S. Senate. The case is a little more complicated than that. Now, I'm very familiar with this argument. There was a witness in my case who did not want to testify. He raised this exact same article, with the trial court judge in my case, who of course ruled against him. Then he it at the appeals court, and they ruled against him. And they ruled that this gentleman, his name was Andrew Miller, had to testify. In the end, they never called him to testify. To my knowledge, there's nothing detrimental he could have testified about me. This all became just a battle over control and thuggery, but I think their case was wrongly decided. Now, I noticed that just before the deadline, the president's lawyers filed a motion in the Florida documents case raising this issue. They did so in a somewhat cursory way, but they still got their foot in the door for future consideration. They also raised some questions about the legitimacy of the funding of Mr. Smith's investigation. Is this an argument that the president's lawyers are going to be pursuing aggressively?
Yes, absolutely, Roger. We've raised this exact issue, the validity of Jack Smith's appointment as special counsel, his service as special counsel in the Southern District of Florida in the ongoing federal documents case down there. As you said, amicus briefs by Ed Meese and we believe others as well are going to be filed or have been filed in that case as well. We're going to make that case because at base, the Constitution sets up a system of superior and inferior officers. With the appointment of Jack Smith and with the authority that he currently has, we believe they're running roughshod over that constitutional system. So we're going to be mounting that case vigorously. We think ultimately it's an issue that could end up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court historically has been very skeptical of efforts to do these sorts of end runs around the Senate confirmation process, around the usual appointment process for officers of the United States. So I think it's a powerful argument, and it really speaks to the fact that none of these cases should have been brought in the first place. I mean, the fact that they sort of dragged Jack Smith back from The Hague, doing whatever the heck he was doing over there in this harebrained effort just to get Trump, using the federal courts and using federal prosecution as a tool to do that, it's really outrageous, and it should outrage all Americans of all political stripes who care about our Constitution, who care about the rule of law, and who care about the separation of powers.
So we now know, based on published reports, that Fannie Wills and Nathan Wade visited the White House to meet with the Biden legal counsel. We know that Alvin Bragg and Letitia James went to Washington, went to the White House to meet with Biden's legal counsel. We certainly know that Special Counsel Jack Smith went to the White House to meet, and members of his staff went to the White House to meet with Biden's general counsel. We additionally know that the Biden operation placed a lawyer inside prosecutor Fannie Wills' office in Fulton County, Georgia. Is there not at least a civil RICO conspiracy here on the part of those trying to take down Donald Trump?
Yeah, Roger, I think when you look at all the facts here, it's very, very clear that all of these legal efforts, both federal and state, are being coordinated or being pushed by Joe Biden and his core team at the White House and the Department of Justice. The guy who is sort of the key man in Alvin Bragg's office bringing this criminal prosecution against President Trump is Matthew Colangelo, who used to be the number 3 guy in Biden's Department of Justice. As you said, Fani Willis and Nathan Wade both spent time at the White House in the lead up to their indictment of President Trump in Georgia. Notably, Nathan Wade was checked into the White House for 8 hours on November 18th, 2022, which is the exact same day that Jack Smith was appointed special counsel. When you look at all of the facts and when you pull them all together, it's clear that these aren't separate cases. These aren't cases that were just brought based on the law and the facts. These were cases that were brought as part of a coordinated effort by Joe Biden and his political allies to get President Trump. And that's just a wild abuse of our legal system. And I hope the people responsible for it are held accountable.
So, look, I'm not a lawyer, but why not file a civil RICO case and file it as a related case in front of Judge Cannon in Florida?
It's very difficult to challenge a pending criminal prosecution with a civil action while the criminal prosecution is ongoing. There are abstention doctrines and other legal bars to doing that. But I think certainly after we win these cases, after we've vindicated President Trump in court, that will be the time to really start looking seriously at what happened and pursuing all legal remedies available to the president.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Will Scharf, who is one of President Donald Trump's attorneys, representing him in multiple actions at this time. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's also a candidate for the office of Missouri Attorney General. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about that when we come right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
We're back, folks. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Will Scharf, who is a former federal prosecutor, a candidate for Attorney General in the Republican primary in Missouri. He is a Princeton University graduate as well as a Harvard Law graduate, and we're very grateful to have him on the show today. Will, I have to ask you an obvious question. Running for public office is, well, it's an all-consuming enterprise. You really give up your life, yet you are not only providing incredibly valuable help to the president, President Trump, but you're also running for Attorney General. How's that working?
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically working 2 full-time jobs at this point, Roger, but so far things are going great. You know, what we hear from voters across Missouri is that people are fired up. People are sick of the swamp, both in our nation's capital and in our state capital, and they're ready for authentic conservative leadership. I think the exact same wave that brought President Trump into office in 2016, we're going to see a very similar dynamic play out now in 2024. People are sick and tired of business as usual, and it's just been great to get out and spend a lot of time with good conservatives across the state.
I mean, looking at your background, you seem to me to be perfectly qualified for this job. As a federal prosecutor, you were assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit in one of America's most dangerous cities, St. Louis. In 2.5 years, you led the prosecution of over 100 federal felony cases ranging from firearms and drug cases to carjackings, bank robberies, escape from custody. I mean, clearly you have a record as a crime fighter, but you also served as a policy director in the Missouri governor's office, where you worked with the governor to cut taxes, cut wasteful spending, reduce the burden of state regulations, pass tort reform measures, and advance pro-life policies. I mean, you look to me like, well, almost the ideal candidate. Let's be crassly commercial about this. If folks want to contribute to your campaign, let's tell them where they can go.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Roger. You can find us online at votescharf.com, VOTESCHARF.com. We've been having a lot of fun. You know, it's on the violent crime issue. You guys have seen this problem in New York. We've seen it in cities across America. If you don't prosecute violent crime, you get more violent crime. We know how to beat this issue. It's to lock up all the violent criminals, and I'm deeply committed to doing that, hopefully as Missouri's next Attorney General.
Excellent. This has been a terrific discussion you really clarified a number of things for me, particularly on both the immunity issue and the appointments clause issue. So, folks, go by there, make a contribution to Will Scharf. Will, thank you so much for joining us at last minute notice here at the Roger Stone Show on this beautiful Sunday. God bless you, my friend, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Roger. It's an honor. I've been a fan of yours for a long time.
All right, folks, that was Will Scharf, one of President Donald Trump's lawyers. He has, as he pointed out, he's working literally 2 full-time jobs. I didn't even have time to get into the so-called Florida documents case. That one particularly vexes me. I'm not sure how we can have a trial regarding the retention by Donald Trump of classified and top secret documents. First of all, that he claims under the 1997 Presidential Records Act he's entitled to have, but then secondarily, the special counsel wants to keep secret not only from the American people, but also in this case from the defendant, Donald Trump, exactly what documents they're talking about. This is like Alice in Wonderland stuff. Anyway, I want to thank you for tuning into the Roger Stone Show today on 77 WABC Radio. Ask you one more time to go to the App Store now on your cell phone and download the 77 WABC app so you don't miss, say, Larry Kudlow on Saturdays, or the Queen of the Night, the Queen of all gossip, Cindy Adams. My good friend, Dominic Carter, who always has his fingers on the pulse of what's happening in New York. Or if you're a night owl, you don't want to miss The Other Side of Midnight with my good friend, Frank Morano. And of course, you got to start every single day with Sid Rosenberg if you want to know what's going on. And then, of course, John Katz and Rita Cosby always telling you the latest on what's going on every single day and bringing the biggest names in news right here to 77 WABC so you can get it right from the horse's mouth. We're very excited about the dynamic lineup that we have here at 77 WABC Radio. I thank you for our ever-expanding audience here on our Sunday show. Again, we're here every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. And if you're not in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where you can always find us at 660 on the dial, well, you can go to WABCradio.com and listen to us worldwide. Now, don't go anywhere because my good friend Joe Piscopo is going to be right along with Sundays with Sinatra. Until next Sunday, God bless you and Godspeed.